Today I'm going to tell you the 3 most common mixing mistakes that I see beginners make. So I'll start out by telling you the 3 things. Number 1 is basic levels. People have a really hard time determining how loud the different instruments should be within a mix. Number 2 is overprocessing, which means using way too many plugins per track and doing too much with plugins. And number 3 is EQ. Poor EQ is probably the most common mistake I see people making. So the reason I know this is because I'm a professor at BerkleeNYC, and I teach students from all over the world. Students always ask me to critique their mixes, critique their productions. And I've done this enough over the past 2 years that I've worked there, where now I've started to see a lot of common issues that most of the students experience with the records that they play for me. I mentioned number 1, the most common issue I see among beginner producers and engineers is just basic leveling. I hear a lot of mixes that the tonal qualities and choices people have made are actually really great, but the balance is just all over the place. So I often hear drums are too soft, bass is too loud, vocals are too soft. Sometimes this can be a result of your listening environment. So if you only work on headphones, if you only ever work on one pair of headphones, that could be skewing your perception of the levels that you think are correct. Or if you're working on speakers in a room that doesn't sound great, it doesn't sound like a treated room, that's going to impact the choices you make while you're mixing. The most common thing I do when I critique someone's mix is to have them completely re-level all the instruments in a mix from scratch. And the way we do that is we always start with the lead vocal first. I have them solo the lead vocal, and then we slowly solo in instruments one at a time around the lead vocal. And we use the lead vocal as our guideline for how loud the other instruments can be around it in the mix. No other instrument in the mix should eclipse the lead vocal or crowd it out. So we'll start with lead vocals first, and then we'll solo in the drums one by one, get the whole drum kit in. Then we'll solo in the bass. So we'll listen to just vocals, drums, and bass. Then we'll start bringing in some of the chordal instruments, and we fit them all in one at a time, instead of trying to digest everything at once and adjusting levels, listening to the whole song. That can be really difficult. The number 2 thing people struggle with the most is overprocessing, using too many plugins. So a lot of times when I hear sounds that are really wild and sound like they need help, when I look at someone's plugin chain, they might have 10, 12, 13 different plugins. And when you're doing that much, you're basically creating so many variables, there's so many things interacting on your plugin chain that it can be really difficult to adjust anything because you don't exactly know where the sounds are being augmented in this plugin chain. There's too many things happening at once. So I like to tell people you should be able to accomplish your mixing goals with anywhere from 5 to, I'd say, 8 plugins max. So if I listen to a mix and say the lead vocal sound is really wild and maybe harsh sounding, I'll have people mute all the plugins, and then we bring them in one at a time through the chain until we identify where a plugin is pushing the sound astray to sound worse instead of better. And a lot of times when you minimize your plugins, you'll need fewer plugins that are actually correcting problems being created by earlier plugins in the chain. So a lot of times you'll see people using 2 or 3 EQs in your whole chain, and the last 2 EQs are only trying to correct problems you've created yourself with previous plugins. Don't overprocess your sounds with too many plugins, either in your tracks or on your master fader. And the third thing that people struggle with the most is just basic EQ. The most common problems with EQ are either making things too bright, brighter than they really should be by adding too much high-end information, or the other most common EQ problem is making your sounds too thin by removing too much low end from say your vocals or your drums. When you take out all that low end and low mids, you're going to make something sound less impactful, less powerful, and just more thin. So if your entire song feels too thin, you've probably removed too many lows, and your overprocessing with plugins can squash a song and make it sound less big because you're doing too much to it. So if you can really rein in those 3 things, get your levels together, don't overprocess, and focus on your EQ, you can 10x the sound of how your mixes come across to the listener. Like and subscribe for more, and hit me in the comments with any specific questions. Peace.